Welcome back. High stakes this weekend, and of course, there's a Wisconsin connection, the emerging battle to be the new chair of the Democratic National Committee after Democrats' major losses. Democratic Party of Wisconsin Chairman Ben Wickler this weekend seriously thinking about launching a bid. Already, Ken Martin from Minnesota and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley announcing their intentions to run.
Jennifer Holdsworth, a Democratic strategist, managed a DNC race in 2017 for Pete Buttigieg. Let's bring her in. She joins us now. Hey, Jennifer, good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
First, I want to start in Wisconsin with all this chatter surrounding Ben Wickler, the chair of the state party here. He says he is seriously thinking about a bid. Is this the direction you think DNC members want to go? What is the state of this race at this point?
Right. I think what a lot of people need to remember about the DNC race is that it's actually a very insular process. This is not something that the party writ large or registered Democratic voters vote on like a primary. These are people, party activists who have been involved in DNC operations for a long time that are voting on this. What I like to tell people is that this is a cross between a presidential election and a student council race. There's about 400 plus voters that are voting on who is going to lead this party. I think that Ben is a very, exciting candidate because one of the things that the Democratic Party has struggled with, over the last 8 years is maybe moving into a new type of leadership. And Ben might be one of the people who's able to provide that.
Can you take us inside how these races work? How contentious is a race like this going to get?
It's very friendly. It's much more similar to a sibling rivalry than you would see out on the campaign trail. These are people that have known each other for a long time. This is not a body or an organization who in the past has been very focused on messaging. This is not a body in the past that has been focused on policy. I think you're seeing a cry for change, though. This is an organization that is ripe for change. And I think you're going to see a lot of candidates bring new ideas to the table rather than just what it has been used for in the past.
I was going to say, you managed this coming off of Trump winning in 2016. Is what we're seeing now a five-alarm fire for Democrats like we saw in 2017?
So the answer is yes and no. It is a five-alarm fire in terms of what we're going to be facing coming out of a Trump administration. Obviously, we've seen with some of the cabinet picks already, things that we should be very alarmed about, not just as a Democratic Party, but as a country. It is not a five-alarm fire in so much as some of reports have indicated that Trump has some kind of mandate because this was a blowout. The truth is it wasn't. This came down to barely over 1% difference. Same thing in most of the House and Senate races. So, I think going in a completely knee-jerk different direction and blowing up everything that we have done over the last 4 years may not be called for. I think what it's going to take is a party leader who is willing to make some of the tough decisions that people don't want to make, have some of the hard conversations that Democrats aren't really interested in having right now, and show that leadership that might have been lacking over the last 4 years in terms of how we talk to voters.
Coming off Democrats' losses earlier this month, how big of a decision is this going to be in terms of who leads the DNC when it comes to the future of the party?
Personally, I think it's going to be extraordinarily important because normally the incumbent president is the leader of your party. We don't have that right now. I think what you're seeing is a generational shift in how the party is going to operate. One of the things I'm excited about is just the sheer number of people that are throwing their hat in the ring. One of our party leaders right now is Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And he's really going to set the tone for what the Democrats are doing in their fight against Donald Trump's policies. But we will need the DNC to be a very strong operation in order to back him up.
An interesting and fascinating race that we will watch. Democratic strategist Jennifer Holdsworth. Jennifer, hey, thank you so much for your insight and perspective.
Thank you for having me. Have a great week.
Up next, the push for bipartisanship in Washington. The group No Label is set to hold its national meeting in just days. First, though, its chief strategist Ryan Clancy is with us. Their new efforts and Wisconsin's role next.